Steve Scariano was in high school when magazines like Circus, Cream, Phonograph, and Rolling Stone were not only publishing articles on guitar gods and rock and roll frontmen, but offering record reviews of bands one might not hear on most FM stations of that era. Steve loved reading about and discovering new music, and before long he was playing bass for bands in and around St. Louis and Champaign. Record albums are still very much a part of his life. He's surrounded by thousands of them in his office, tucked away in the lower level of Euclid Records. And those who know his story know that Steve Scariano has led a rock and roll life. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. Steve, I appreciate you doing this.
Great to be here, Dave.
You and I didn't go to school together. We never worked together, but I feel like over time I got to know you through lots of mutual friends, and we'd see each other at concerts and record stores. You work at a record store, one of my favorites.
That I do.
And how long has that been?
This go round at Euclid, I've been there doing mail order since, when was it? 2006.
Well, that's right, because you did a couple stints there.
I did a stint from 87 when I moved back here. I'd been living in Champaign for 6 years. And I moved back here in 87, and I worked at Euclid, the old Euclid, when it was on Euclid. And then the move to Laclede in the West End. I worked from 87 to 96. And then I went over and worked at Vintage Vinyl for 10 years.
Oh, that's right. I remember you were there for a while. Well, you're also one of those people I pay attention to on social media because we seem to have similar tastes and music, and not just in a wide variety of music, but film, television, pop culture seem to be kind of in sync on that level.
We do. We do seem to be in sync.
Yeah.
You were always that guy, hey, look, it's Nick Lowe. I would see you at shows, and then we finally met.
Yeah. Probably at a Nick Lowe show.
Yeah, it's possible.
I think today is his birthday, I was told, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still don't quite see, I guess. Maybe the hair, I don't know, maybe the glasses.
Dude, you look like Nick Lowe.
Okay. There's worse things to be compared
Absolutely.
to. So. Well, when you were a kid, your older brother played blues guitar?
Yeah, I was fortunate, growing up. I had an older brother and older sister. And my brother is 6 years older than me. My big sister is 8 years older than me. Growing up in the 60s, they were, at the right age at that time, when the Beatles hit and everything. So the radio was always on in our house and in the car. And so my brother and sister were big musical influences. And my brother started playing guitar pretty late. I think he started in his early 20s and got good right away, tried to show me how to play guitar, and that failed miserably. For some reason, the guitar didn't take with me, like a hand-eye coordination problem that I had. I just couldn't make chords. But my brother was real good, and he played blues guitar, and he was like in bands in East St. Louis where he'd be the only white guy in the band. And, he kind of quit that after a while. But, yeah, he was pretty good.
I do see, as I mentioned, I see a lot of your online posts. And I kind of lit up when I saw that you were also a big fan of Chris Spedding.
My favorite rock guitar player.
I see something. Any other big influences? I'm sure there's many influences, but any other really big influences on what music you like and on how you play?
Ooh, two different things. It's weird because there's musicians who are musicians, and then there's musicians who are like, record guys and fans. The two don't always are the same thing. I've known musicians who have like 8 records. and they're totally into the instrument and everything about it, but they don't know much about music beyond, the 8 records they have. It's funny. There's musicians that work at music stores, and then there's musicians who work at record stores, and the two are kind of different breeds. I'm a record guy. I still, I started playing in bands and stuff when the original punk thing happened, and I joined my first band in 1977. Barely knew what the fuck I was doing, barely could play. So I've never really thought of myself as a musician. It's like I kind of choke on the word when someone asks, "Oh, you're a musician?" I'm like, yeah. I still feel like I'm going to get kicked out. That I don't have the proper schooling and qualifications and whatever. But I've been doing this for 40 plus years, so I
think that's what it takes. Just keep doing it.
So influences, getting back to your question, everything has influenced me music-wise. Like I said, everything in the 60s and then in the early 70s was just so great. All of that was the biggest influence on my musical taste and directions and whatever. And as far as what's affected me as a musician and how I play and stuff, it's not one particular style. It's knowing a lot of records, knowing a lot of, different bands and seeing a lot of different live music over the years. All of that becomes just one big influence. And so I'm the type of bass player that it's like, what does this song need? What is the songwriter want from it? What's the groove? What's the feel? And so I'll think of, when I'm trying to figure out what to play on a specific song, it could come from some record I heard back in 1978 or something. It's like, it just comes from anywhere. Any record I've ever heard, or, any band I've seen or whatever.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying, because I think it gets harder to single out influences when you like so many things. And
well, I think that's shown in all the different bands I've been in, where I've not stuck to one sort of style or type of band. It's I think every band I've been in has been pretty different from each other.
And you've been in quite a few. There's a pretty long list of bands that you've been in over the years. So. And then recently you're kind of doing you're in a couple bands.
Well, really only one that's actually doing anything at the moment. It was just Vince Motel. Still in the Love Experts. We're technically still together. We have a record we're supposed to be finishing at some point. As I like to say, we're a band prone to long work stoppages, and we're in the middle of a really, really long one. But yeah, so technically, I'm still in 2 bands, but right now in 2022, Vince Motel is really the only one that's up and functioning and doing stuff.
Lost.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
And then, like in the summer of after my sophomore year in high school, I decided to be a guitar player. I was starting to really make progress in that sucker, and I guess I thought it was more a sexier instrument or something. I don't know. I didn't know that really in real life, most women go for the drummers.
D. Clinton Thompson provided guitar and vocals to the much-loved bands The Morels and The Skeletons. You can find my talk with the incredibly talented and often hilarious Donnie Thompson in Season 1 of Frets. Well, Well, some of the bands that you were in over the years opened up for some really great bands and great artists.
Yeah, lots of opening for people over the years.
What was the first time you were in a band that opened up for someone like a pretty big name?
Let's see. Back when I was living in Champaign, playing in a band called Bee Lovers, we opened for David Johansen.
Oh, wow.
And, pretty big hero. It was a great gig, a great time, and he was very nice to us.
That's good. I like hearing that. I could imagine he would be. Well, I'm guessing there were a lot of others. Were there, along with that, were there any, very memorable experiences you had, like meeting, say, a musical hero of yours?
Yeah, I've met a lot of heroes, playing with and also through, the various record stores I've worked at. Met a lot of heroes over the years. Recently, in the past 10 years, starting with the Jans Project, the band I was in, we did a bunch of shows with Chuck Prophet.
Nice.
And so gotten to become good friends with Chuck and the Mission Express guys and girl, Stephanie. And that's just as a recent example of, when you meet one of your musical heroes and they're even better human being than, you dreamed that they would be. And all the cats in that band are just wonderful, wonderful people and players. And that's an example of, a musical hero that's just been as cool as shit to me. And the band's Jan's Project, and then Finn's opened for Chuck last time he was in town at Off-Broadway. No, not last time, a couple times ago now, losing track of time thanks to the pandemic.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
Yeah, so that's an example of that.
Yeah, I always say Off-Broadway. I think if I had to say in St. Louis, I think that's still my favorite venue to see a band is Off-Broadway.
It's my favorite place to play.
You opened up for a lot of bands over the years, and one time I remember you told me you opened up for Yola Tango.
6 times.
Wow.
The first, and this was all before they were kind of big or got bigger than they were. First time was in summer of '86 in Des Moines, I believe, Iowa, in a basketball gym. And Yola Tango were freaked out about that because the sound was horrible. I was in a band out of Champaign then called Pop the Balloon with Rick Mink of Velvet Crush and Matthew Sweet fame, and young 18-year-old Adam Schmidt at that time. Then played with other bands I was in, through the rest of the 80s and early 90s. A couple of shows I know at Cicero's. I opened for them. There was maybe 20 people there. And then this was all before it hit for them. And so glad when it did hit for them.
Yeah, they became huge.
The little band that could.
Yeah.
Great people.
Yeah, I always refer
Great band, great people.
I always refer to Ira and Georgia as the Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward of rock. Really sweet. Met them both a couple times at shows at smaller venues. We mentioned Champaign. You were actually living there for a while.
Yeah, I lived there from summer of 81 through summer of 87, although the journey of how I got there actually started in 78 with the meeting of drummer Jeff Evans, who I wound up playing with for the next 40 years off and on. It was at a Kinks and Blondie show at the Old Kiel Opera House in 1978. And after Blondie's opening set, we were standing around in the aisle at intermission. It was me and Dave Thomas, who I was still in the Singapores with at that time, a couple members of the Welders, and probably a couple of the Ray Milan guys. And this really cool-looking guy comes walking up the aisle and had a Bay City Rollers haircut and
a big hair.
Yeah, and candy cane scarf and total rock star looking dude. And our little new wave scene in St. Louis at that time, we all kind of knew each other because it wasn't that big. And if you weren't friends with somebody and if you didn't know somebody, you at least seen them around and knew that, okay, they're into this too, but right. I don't know them yet, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we're all like, Jeff walks by us, is like, who is that? Do you know that guy? And we were just like, no, I've never seen him before. And at that time, me and Dave in the Singapores, our drummer had just quit. And so we were looking for a drummer. And I jokingly said to Dave, go ask that guy if he's a drummer. And Dave, being the type of guy that Dave was, okay, I'll go do that. And he did that. And it turns out Jeff was a drummer. And he was from Decatur, Illinois, which is 120 miles away from St. Louis, up north in Illinois. And they exchanged numbers. And I didn't meet Jeff that night. Saw him, was mighty impressed with how he looked. And so they exchanged numbers, and we never got around to asking Jeff because I quit the band shortly thereafter, and that was that. So a couple months later, I put together this really cool power pop band, and we were a power pop band, even though I really hate the term power pop, but we were your 1978 Skinny Tie power pop band. It was me and this great guitar player, songwriter Billy Love, and Dominic Finocchio, who I would play with years later in the Love Experts. And we needed a drummer, and nobody knew of any drummers in St. Louis. So I called Dave Thomas. Hey, Dave, you still got that phone number of that guy from Decatur? And I called up Jeff, and he came down, and we auditioned him at Jane and Caroline Fujimoto of the Welders house. And I think the first song we did was Slow Down by the Beatles. And within the first 10 seconds, there was this thunder, this Keith Moon-like thunder that was unlike anything I had ever heard before. And not only did Jeff look the part and look so damn cool, amazing Keith Moon-like drummer.
Wow.
And okay, what are we going to do about this? You live 120 miles away and we live here. And so what happened was he had a farmhouse. He was living out in rural Decatur. So me and Billy and Dominic would go up there and rehearse, and things were really good, and we were getting ready to play our first gig, and then Dominic decided he didn't want to be in the band anymore for personal reasons, and that was the end of that. A couple months later, I get a call from my old buddy Dave Branyon in Memphis. He was in this band, this Memphis power pop band called the Scruffs, and he had left the Scruffs, and he was going to do a solo album. And he called me up, wanted to know if I wanted to play bass with him. And I'm like, sure. And he's like, you know any drummers? I'm like, as a matter of fact, I do. And so me and Jeff and Dave, the next thing we know, we're at Ardent Studios and we're making a record, and John Fry is producing it. And this is the first time I've done anything in like a real recording studio, and it's with fucking John Fry. Yeah. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Not only are we making a record with John Fry, but the legendary John Hampton is the engineer. And the first day of the sessions, he plugs me into this high watt, 100 watt head and a Marshall 4x12 cabinet. And I'm like, oh, you can do this with a bass? He's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It sounds cool. We do it all the time on bass. It's a great rig for bass. Okay. And it sounds amazing. So we started working on basic tracks, and we were taking a break that day, and John comes over. He goes, you know, that's the rig Alex played this Strat through on Radio City.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, fuck. This is just getting more and more insane. So we were, started work on basic tracks and everything. And then a couple weeks later, the guy who was managing Dave was this rich kid, and his father decided he no longer wanted to bankroll his son's crazy endeavors in the music business.
Cut him off.
And that was the end of that record. It never
came to fruition.
No, we were, like I said, we were still doing basic tracks, and hardly anything had been done on it, and the plug got pulled. So that was the end of that. And this is all in the same year. So December of 1980, I am completely bummed out. I am not knowing what the hell I'm going to do. I had kind of detached myself from the scene, which was growing in St. Louis, but there weren't any bands that were doing anything for me. And I didn't know anybody that, I wasn't meeting anyone I wanted to play with, seeing anyone I wanted to play with. There weren't any venues, really. People were doing the VF Hall rental thing. And like I said, I was kind of detached and just kind of wallowing. John Lennon had just been shot. It was a real bummed out time, except I had become obsessed with the records, the 45s that Chris Stamey was putting out. And Chris Stamey's Gang, the Sneakers records, the H-Bombs, and then the first Stevie record. And I became obsessed. And it's like, this is where the shit's going. This is what I want to do. Music like this. The big problem was there was nobody in St. Louis that I knew that wanted to play music like that. Then a couple of weeks before Christmas, I get a call from Jeff, and he had been playing with a couple of friends of his, Bernie Proschel and Nick Rudd, and another guy. And he said, Steve, we're getting rid of our bass player. Please come play bass with us. Nick is writing really cool songs. I think you'll like it. We really want you to come play with us. I'm like, oh, well, send me a tape. Let me hear what you guys are doing. I get a cassette. It's 3 of Nick Rudd's earliest songs, and they're incredible. And he was like 19 or 20 at the time. And I'm like, okay. And I go to Decatur, and we play, and this is it. And the next thing you know, we're the Monkees at the beach house. We're in love with each other. This is the band. And so I started commuting to Decatur again a couple times a week to rehearse. And the goal was to, we didn't play out for like the first year, for almost the first year. We just honed everything. Nick was writing incredible songs. We were figuring out how to play with each other. And the goal was to eventually play in Champaign, where there was a really cool scene happening at the time. And it was all centered around this amazing club called Mabel's, which held about 350 people, a 2-story club, the big stage, incredible sound. And they were getting national acts, really cool national acts, and cool local bands. And there was a cool local scene happening. And so that was kind of the eventual goal, was when we were ready, it's like, we'll go play in Champaign. And we did. And we got accepted on that scene right away. There was this now legendary band called the Vertebrats. You may know them from the song Left in the Dark that the Replacements covered.
Oh, yeah.
Courtney Love also covered it. I think a few other people have covered it. Garage band classic. Anyway, they were kind of the kings of the scene, and they opened their arms to us and gave us their blessing, which meant the rest of the scene took to us pretty quickly. So shit was getting serious, and then there was a new record store opening in Champaign, and I found out they were hiring. And I got a job, and I moved to Champaign knowing one person, and that was Brad Stakely, who is known to the world as Brad Elvis from the Elvis Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he got me an apartment in the building he was living in. He was the only person I knew outside of a handful of other people that I got introduced at parties and stuff when we played, but I really didn't know anybody but Brad. And so I moved to Champaign. Eventually, the rest of the band moved to Champaign, and that band was the Be-Lovers. And within a year, we put out a 45, and we were playing around up and down the state, and playing here and in Chicago, and that's how I wound up in Champaign.
It's your shining hour, the one that you've been waiting for. It's your shining hour, the one that you've been waiting for.
Looking to buy a guitar, an amp, pedals? Find great deals on all of these, as well as audio and recording gear at reverb.com. You can also sell your gear through Reverb. They have great articles about music gear and bands. And Reverb believes music makes the world a better place. That's why they created Reverb Gives, that provides youth music education programs all over the world with the instruments they need to make music. Link to Reverb through Frets with DJ Fey in the show notes for this episode.
Wow. So record stores out of town and now record stores here in St. Louis. It's been a recurring occupation for you for a while when you're not playing in bands. I am, and I'm sure you are too, a huge Small Faces fan and a Faces fan. I know Ian McLaughlin did at least one, maybe a couple in-stores at Euclid. You've talked about meeting him, and I know you talked about what a great guy, what a nice guy he was. I would have loved to have had a conversation with him.
Wonderful guy. Wonderful guy. Euclid had put out some live 45s. We started recording in stores.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we put out a 45 series of recordings from various in stores, and we did one with Mac. And so I got to know Mac through his relationship with Joe Schwab, the owner of Euclid, and got to see him at the Lucky Lounge in Austin, where he did a regular Thursday happy hour.
Yeah, he lived there for years.
Yeah. And Joe and I were down there for record convention one time. Yeah, a couple of times actually, and because I know, we saw him there twice. And it's a happy hour, and it's Ian McLaughlin and the Bump Band, and you're 10 feet away from the guy who played on Itchy Park. It's that sound. It's
wow.
It's just it was incredible. It was an honor to meet him, honor to see him. It's just what can you say, Ian McLaughlin?
Yeah, somewhere around here I've got a stack of 45s and. That's one of them. Peter Holsapple, you guys did a
and Steve Wynn did one.
Right.
Peter Case did one. NRBQ did one.
Another band we share a love for is the Kinks, and their original bass player Pete Quaife. Oh, another one. So sad that he's gone. It's a band that did successfully when he decided to leave for a variety of reasons. John Dalton came along and proved to be a great replacement and was with the Kinks for quite a few albums and really just seemed to be, fall right in and was a really fantastic bass player.
It's a period that I love a lot of the Kinks, the Dalton years. That guy doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Great bass player. Rodford was good too,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought Dalton was really, really great in a really, really great period for the Kinks that I still think they don't get enough respect for that period because they were doing Broadway shows and shit. But I love that period. And
I did too.
It was a great band and really great live shows. And Dalton, like I said, doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, and they also added John Gosling, John the Baptist came along as keyboard player.
And ex-St. Louis and Debbie Doss was one of the backup singers.
That's right. I have such great memories of Woodhouse concerts that we've talked about a lot, but I'm going to talk about it again because I did meet Mike Mills when the Baseball Project played there and got to talk to him a little bit. I've even got a signed baseball somewhere around here from Mike Mills. What do you think of his bass playing?
He's a god. He's been a huge influence on my playing. I don't try and play like people because I can't. I have a lot of favorite bass players. I have a lot of influences. But he's somebody who has had a significant influence on how I play, especially on what I do in Finn's Motel. The three bass players that I go to the most in terms of influence on Finn's Motel stuff are Mike and Tom Peterson and John Entwistle. Mostly Mills. It's always, when I'm trying to figure out bass parts for Finn's Motel songs, 9 times out of 10, maybe, what would Mike Mills do? And then when I stop and I think, okay, what would Mike Mills do here? It's usually clear. And then I know what to do.
What is that? WWMMD,
yeah.
I guess.
I can't say enough. He's so great. And he paid me one of the biggest compliments anybody's ever paid me. It's kind of funny. In 1982, when Chronic Town had just come out, my band in Champaign, the Bee Lovers, played with REM the first time they came to Champaign in this ridiculously huge basketball gym. Horrible sound, gigantic stage. It was kind of silly that they got booked there, as there was maybe 200 people, but it was a campus show, on the University of Illinois and student show, and they had all kinds of money, so they booked it into this basketball gym thinking there would be thousands and thousands of people when there was 200. So anyway, we play our set, and, like I said, Chronic Town had just come out. So it was the four of them and then manager Jefferson Holt. That was it. So they were setting up their own stuff. We were moving our stuff off stage, and we're on stage moving our equipment, and they're moving their equipment. And Mike stops me. He says, "You guys were really great, and I really liked the way you played. You remind me of me."
That's a great compliment.
And in fact, I reminded him of that at the Woodhouse concert. He said, "Yeah, it sounds like something I would say." Great guy. I can't say enough about his playing, and, one of the gods.
That's a fun band to see. Baseball Project.
We mentioned the pandemic. 2020 was, it was just a bizarre year, and a lot of us were just put in a position of changing the way we did lots of things. How did it affect playing for you? How did it affect, I don't know, just, the bands you were in at the time, or any kind of recording you were doing?
What's interesting about that time was at the end of 2018, Finn's Motel decided, I think we did our last gig around Labor Day of 2018, and we decided to go into studio hibernation and just record for a while. And so we spent all of 2019 just recording. And so when the lockdown came, we had, 2 albums worth of stuff in the can that wasn't finished. But, like I said, we had just recorded a ton of stuff. And so when lockdown came, we were able to keep working on this stuff. And so we decided, okay, this batch of tunes is going to make one record. And so we concentrated on what eventually became our Fireworks or Lightning album. And at the start of lockdown, when we couldn't get together at first, it's like, okay, what are we going to do? And so Joe and Scott both have home studios, and Jack, our drummer, has the big professional studio, and I didn't. And there were a couple of bass overdubs that still needed to be done. And so my big thing in the pandemic was learning how to do Pro Tools from home so I could do a couple of bass overdubs that needed to be done.
Can you think of any artist or any band that you really like that might surprise some people?
Yeah, the Grateful Dead.
The Grateful Dead.
Well, I only like the Grateful Dead up to say 74. I got off the bus then. I'm particularly fond of 1972 Grateful Dead. But yeah, it's kind of weird. People don't expect that from me, and I don't say I'm a Deadhead or anything like that, but I do like that period of them a lot. And whenever anybody finds that out about me, they're kind of like, huh?
Yeah, I was going to say, even knowing you and knowing that you like many, many, many bands and types of music, yeah, I wouldn't have, come to mind that you, but I'm kind of the same way. I would never consider myself a Deadhead. I saw them one time in my lifetime, and I saw the Grateful Dead years ago. I did see Bob Weir once also, but I know exactly what you're saying. I'm kind of the same way. I love a lot of the early Dead stuff, but yeah, it wasn't like a band that I followed really closely, or that that I went to see every time, followed them around, or
whenever anybody gives me that then I follow that up with, they're one of my favorite punk bands. And then that really throws them off. But they really are. And if you think about the whole DIY ethic of punk rock, well, the Grateful Dead were kind of one of the first bands to do that. People don't remember that about them, but they were one of the first that started putting out their own records. Keeping a road crew on retainer all the time, having this big, massive fan club that became the Deadheads. They're pretty punk rock in my book.
Interesting. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. When he was 15, playing rugby and football at his middle school in Newport, Wales, John Langford decided he liked playing music better.
Yeah, that was what I did. I was kind of obsessive. Up to about the age of 15, I was playing 3 games a weekend, and it was, suddenly running around in the freezing cold and mud and rain in Wales. I suddenly realised that maybe there was other ways to, express yourself. And I think about the same time I started doing T-Rex and Slade and bands like that, and realised that maybe I wanted to be in a band instead. Something warm indoors.
My talk with musician and artist John Langford of the Mekons, the Waco Brothers, Four Lost Souls, and many other bands, coming up on Frets.
Poison rising over the land, like paws through many hands. It's all part of a perfect plan.
Were there any particular bass guitars when you started playing bass? Were there any particular bass guitars that you liked to play or you started with? And what bass guitars are you playing these days?
Oh, wow. My first bass, was, it looked like a Les Paul guitar. It was not a very good bass. It was, I think National was the brand. I bought it off this little lady that back then, pre-internet and all of that, we had this thing called the Trading Times.
I remember the Trading Times,
where you could, you could buy a Les Paul for $200 out of the Trading Times, and then you could buy a $1,000 car. All in the same issue. And it was a great thing to get every week and scour the Trading Times.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, this would have been 75, 76, I think, and bought it for $90 off this little lady. That was my first bass. It was pretty cool, even though it wasn't that good of a bass. Then second bass was a Rickenbacker 4001, which I still wish I had, but I don't. Mm-hmm. That was a great bass. It was Paul McCartney Blonde. Mm-hmm. And then next bass is my tank, my battle axe, the one I still play today. Is my 65 Fender Precision, which how I got that was kind of weird. I was working at Streetside in Webster then. This would have been 1981. This was right before I moved to Champaign to play in the Bee Lovers band. So I'm working one day, and this guy walks in the Streetside acting like he knew me really, really well. And I'm like, okay, who is this guy? He knows me. He knows a lot about me. So I guess I know this guy. Did I meet him at a party or something? And I don't remember his name. I couldn't place the guy at all, but he's like, hey, I hear you're looking for a Fender bass. And I had put word out that I had been looking for a Fender bass. And he had one. And he's like, yeah, I got out in the car. So we go out the parking lot and I check it out. And he wanted $350 for it. And I said, give me a day. And I took a bunch of records down to Vintage Vinyl. And I told Papa Ray, I said, stop when you hit 350. And he stopped when he hit 350 and bought the bass, and it's been with me ever since. And I still don't know who that guy was. I have a feeling, and I hate to say this, I have a feeling that it was probably hot.
Oh, wow.
The more I think about the story after all these years, the more I look back on it, it's like, this was too weird. I think it was hot. Yeah, I still don't know who that guy was, who was my long-lost friend, apparently.
Mystery guy.
Yeah, mystery guy. But yeah, so that's my main bass. That's been through everything with me, and it is a tank. A lot of shit has happened to that bass, good and bad, and it always comes through. It sounds great, plays great, and it's always going to be my main bass. I also have a Carlo Robelli 8-string bass, which is kind of a toy, but it's fun. And I have a Waterstone TP4 semi-hollow bass, which is kind of cool for that sort of sound that I pull out every now and then. Sometimes play it on gigs. But yeah, my P bass is my man.
And then like amps and pedals. Do you use a lot of pedals, or do you use a lot of effects? Or
I have over the last 10 years, I've gotten into pedals. I've got a little pedal board, and I think I have 4 pedals. My favorite pedal is the Saturn pedal that Brad Sarno makes here in town, distortion pedal. That's really cool. But yeah, my main amp for the last 10 years is a Gens-Benz, which the company is now known as Gensler. But back when I bought it, it was Gens-Benz, and it's a great amp.
Yeah, yet another thing. I wish I still had the amps I used to.
Before that, I was partial to Ampegs, and
oh, nice.
And I had a Mesa Boogie for a while in the 90s.
I want to ask what you're listening to these days, but if I know Steve Scariano, it's going to be you're listening to a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I listen to a whole lot of podcasts when I'm at work. I listen to Sirius XM in my car and at work.
Little Steven's Underground.
That's one of my favorite channels.
Too, yeah.
I love a lot of the channels on Sirius. As far as any new music that's knocking me out, this new Irish band, Fontaine's DC, I haven't been knocked out by a new band like they've knocked me out in a long, long time. Great Irish band, young kids, they're doing quite well. They're getting compared to U2 a lot. They don't sound like U2, but they're getting, I've seen things. This is the most important Irish band since U2. They've got a really charismatic lead singer. To me, they're kind of, I'll go back further. That to me, they're like the most important Irish band since the Undertones. And they're just great. They keep, their third record's coming out in a few weeks, and it's better than the last one, which was better than the first one. And they're amazing live band, tons of stuff on YouTube, and just check them out. They'll blow you away.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one of the places that I would run into you a lot over the years, and I'm going to get a little misty talking about it because it's no longer there, is the Woodhouse concerts. Rick and Nancy have moved, and I'm very happy for them. But the classic days of the Woodhouse concerts, I would see you at quite a few of those shows.
We've lost the greatest venue this town's ever had.
That was a great venue.
Absolutely.
That was great.
I've known Rick forever, and long before the house concerts, and it was just the greatest. And so many of my favorites played there, and yours, Dave. And geez, it was just something so special.
It really was.
And it's one of those things you don't miss it till it's gone. And boy, do we miss it now.
Sure do. I mean, that one was very intimate. Getting to hang out and talk with people that in many instances I just never even imagined I'd ever have an opportunity to talk with some of these people or bands.
Yeah, so many great shows.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I still have a hand. I know there's a few photos that I had taken there that I'm pretty sure I got you to take. I'd have you.
I took that picture of Robin Hitchcock.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that. It's one of my favorite photos, and that was one.
That's like, way up there in my favorites. That was a really special show.
Incredible.
He was on it. I mean, he opened with Tonight, the Soft Boy song. It's just okay, you can stop now. This is the greatest thing ever. And Jesus.
Yeah, that was worth the price of admission right there. And he was there with Emma Swift. I'm fairly tall, but every time I look at that picture, I'm reminded that Robin Hitchcock's pretty tall. He was kind of towering over me a little bit. Well, you mentioned some of the work you've been doing recently, but what's next? Anything new coming up musically for Steve Scariano?
Finn's Motel, we're always recording. The band started as a recording project of Joe Tebow's, in 2004. So recording has always been what this band has been about. Right now, we're working on a new EP that we hope to have out, in a month or so, or 2 or 3. This one's going to be, it's funny, our Fireworks Are Lightning record we think it's kind of like a classic rock record, a modern classic rock record, somebody called it. We decided, we've got a lot of stuff we've been working on, and it's hard to lump these things into albums. So we decided, well, let's just do some EPs. And so this first one we're working on right now is kind of a poppy thing where it's going to be 4 songs that are kind of our poppier side. One song is this really great tribute Joe wrote about his trans kids. I'm calling it a trans anthem. It's called Not the Same. There's another song on it that's inspired by our friends, the Welders, punk legends, the Welders. We're also doing a cover of a Tommy Keene song, although it's not going to sound anything like Tommy's.
I'm excited. I'm always
So
excited.
yeah, that's what we're doing right now. There's a show coming up that I'm not at liberty to announce yet, but we'll be playing real soon.
Mom's the word.
Yeah.
Sense of being chosen in a failing ancient language. You were standing upon your hill with the light around your face. Behind your eyes, a secret smile. To my mind, you wrote 1,000 years of history. Every minute, every moment, you were standing upon your hill with the light around your
I like coffee, and I admit I've become a bit of a coffee snob. I drink coffee black because, hey, if you want to load up a cup with cream and sugar and syrups and all that, well, whatever. I want my coffee to be delicious without adding anything to it. I take the time to do pour-overs at home. I grind the beans and use my Chemex. The process is worth the wait, and when I buy beans, I buy coffee from my buddy String Bean Pete, coffee roaster and owner of String Bean Coffee. Pete's goal is to offer the finest beans from around the world. He roasts them passionately in small batches in non-computerized old-school ways to music under a disco ball. Yeah, you heard that right. He's a bit of a kook, but that's why I like him. And I really, really, really like String Bean Coffee. Find out more at stringbeancoffee.com.
Now that we're all, at least I've been slowly getting back out a little bit more and feeling a little more comfortable going to shows and things, I'm guessing I'll probably see you soon at a show or two. And if not, I'm sure I'll see you over at Euclid Records.
Will do.
All right. Well, Steve, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, Dave.
All right.
only one, so small it can't be all there is. Pinholes in the blanket, letting light. Oh, so far, 1,000,000 stars away. Hey, the good ones never stay, and you were gone. You turned to me and said, "One gone." Relief was what you wanted.
Thanks for listening to Frets with DJ Fey. If you like the show, you can follow or subscribe for free at most podcast platforms. Hope you'll join me again next time. Stay tuned.